Okay, we're very lucky again to have the president of the World Bank, my good friend Ajay Banga, with us this afternoon. I think he's doing a great job there, and we have a few questions for him. So we'll begin right
Just
now.
a few.
One of them you'd expect, which is on the 80th anniversary of Bretton Woods, what do you see as the biggest challenges the world has facing it in the area of development?
I mean, I think I don't know if Christina talked about the event we just had at Bretton Woods a little while back, but you know, when the institutions were created, the world was just recovering from a war, enormous destruction, and the whole argument was, is this a reconstruction or is it a development institution? And the compromise that was made, as always, was both. So let's do reconstruction and development. And I think if the focus over the years went more and more to development. Now, if you look at it, the world has wars again. In certain parts of the world, reconstruction is going to be very important in the coming years. Hopefully, if there is peace there, it makes it easier. If there isn't, this is going to be very challenging. But development is very much on the agenda, and I think that the nature of the challenges bill has evolved a little. I believe that the idea that you can segregate poverty and equality and put it into a separate bucket from climate and pandemics and fragility and conflict and violence and food security, I just don't think these buckets are easily separable. So what's really changed is the intertwined nature of that challenge. That, I think, in a way, increases the complexity in a geometric progression, but it is the reality of what we're facing.
So it is a tremendous challenge for the next how many years? 80, 100, whatever.
I won't be around to see those.
Part of the evolution you have highlighted is the need to fix the plumbing at the World Bank. You discussed this at length last year at our last meeting. How is the process going, Ajay?
I've become very good using spanners and wrenches. My plumbing skills have increased enormously. What I meant by that flippant comment actually was that the bank, at the end of the day, it's got many portions to it that are all in their individual way designed to do what they were meant to do. The question is, are we doing together what we should be doing? And I think getting the bank to work together across its different pieces in a way that looks at a country from that lens and applies it in its totality. So if you think about, if one part of the bank builds infrastructure, provides education, schooling, clean air, clean water, food and agricultural practices, that kind of stuff. And that part of the bank also works with the public sector, not only for the jobs the public sector creates, but the right enabling environment for the small businesses and small farmers and larger businesses to be able to generate the jobs we need, then we get a virtuous cycle. If you start not looking at the end being jobs and being the impact on young people and women through what jobs do, and you start looking at your role only as education or climate or water, then I think we miss an opportunity for the sum of the parts to be bigger than just adding up 1 + 1. And I think that's the big part of the plumbing that I was talking about. The second big part was speed. And I know we've made real progress. We used to take us 19 months on the average to get a project from the conversation beginning to approval through the board. We're down to 16 average. I'm aiming for 12 this time next year. We just completed projects in Africa, got them approved in healthcare in 5 countries under 100 days. 2 countries got them in 30 days. We just approved a correspondent banking project in the Pacific Islands in under 10 months for 7 countries. So it can be done. It's not easy. It can be done. It gets complicated because we do have a responsibility on ESF as well, and therefore having the rigor to figure out the risk ranking of which projects are more challenging on ESF versus others, and being careful to manage your way through that is part of that.
So you feel that there's been a lot of progress in cutting down the bureaucracy within the World Bank is one of the long-time criticisms of the World Bank.
Well, it's a bureaucracy of the
bureaucratic.
bank. It's also the way the governance model works, right? I mean, look at IDA. IDA has 1,100 rules built into it from its donors. So if you're going to manage a process of helping poorer countries with 1,100 rules, it makes things very slow. And so simplifying is not just a function of people in the bank. It's also the way we all operate together. And I think shedding light on that and reducing, like the corporate scorecard had 155 items. And you and I have worked in companies. You put 155 items in my objectives, I'll always get an A+ grade.
Right.
Because I'll find 40 that I've done well in. I'll never talk about the other 110 with you. So we're now down to 22. And they're output oriented, not input only. Not only input, meaning let's talk, how many girls went to school because of schools we put up, or how many carbon emissions we avoided because of the work we did, not just how many projects and how many dollars we put in. I think both things are important as measures. And so a lot of the plumbing has to do with simplification, speed. We've got 21 countries where now there's one country manager for IBRD, IDA, IFC, and MEGA. And I'm going to go forward early next year with another 20. So when you start combining middle and back offices, you put one platform for guarantees in place, you can see this story begins to build, where simplification and speed is part of the game. The third thing I've been trying to do is to take the knowledge bank, which I think is as important as the money bank, and simplify it into 5 verticals: people, planet, prosperity, infrastructure, and digital. And then ask the people in the knowledge bank to not only produce reports for everybody, which they should because they are thought-leading aspects of it, but to help in country partnership frameworks, to help in creating capacity for countries, both to create bankable projects, but also to implement them. So become a real partner of the country you're working with. So think of it as all these things put together is part of the plumbing.
But it also must be very good for morale to have this happen.
You're going to have to ask the people who work for me. My morale's just fine.
I've asked a few, and they feel it is. So even though you don't want to comment on it.
Bill's used to me.
Private investment is another piece of closing the gap. And our last sovereign debt report highlighted the contingent debt instruments as part of the menu of options to attract private investment. How is the relationship between the bank and private investment going? Because the last time we spoke, which was in April, you mentioned very strongly this particular area of that you were giving it tremendous importance.
Yeah.
So working with the private sector.
Could I just step back for 1 second and provide some context of the total financing picture?
Right.
And then come to private sector. So there's the capital adequacy framework that the G20 evolution roadmap had. We've kind of worked our way through a large part of it now. We think we're including actions taken as recently a few days ago, we think we've raised about 150 billion of extra capacity in IBRD over the coming decade through a combination of looking at the loan to equity ratios, through hybrid capital, portfolio guarantees, that stuff. We've also done a couple of other things, and one of those is that we've got a livable planet fund set up that is funded partly from IBRD's net income, but also from contributions from a few countries, in Japan and Germany and others. And the idea is to use the money from that fund to help to incentivize countries on a pay-for-results basis for any global public good that they do. So just so you know, our pay-for-results are now roughly half our lending is you get paid if you perform. And in other words, you get a buy down of your interest rate very often if you do better than what you had committed. So Uruguay signed up to exceed their nationally determined contributions on emissions of methane. If they exceed them by X, we buy down by Y. Things like that, so that you can get an action output from your money. The other thing we're trying to do is set up a project preparation facility so I can help with that capacity building I was talking about, again funded from our own retained earnings. So there's a series of things going on, including climate resilient debt clauses and a change in the IBRD pricing to make us more competitive in the middle income countries. All this is part of the public financing. The reality of all these numbers is they're small compared to what the demand is if you are going to meet SDGs and emissions and all the rest of it. That's why the private sector is so important. And I think it's people sometimes get, why wouldn't the private sector bring more? First of all, they will only bring it where there is a spreadsheet out of which they can make sense, that they can make money because the capital has many places to go. And why would it come here and not go there? If that makes a better return, it will go there. And frankly, that's where it should go. So at the end of the day, the task is to find what holds back. So what we did was we took this lab which Mark Carney and Shriti ran with a bunch of people, 15 CEOs from asset managers and banks and operators around the world in it. And they come out with 5 things. And those 5 are all work in process. The first one was, give me clarity on regulatory policy and pricing and tariffs. I was just talking today with Thierry, and we were just talking about clarity on utilities paying up when they should. And if he goes in there and puts up a solar plant and then gets told, I'm going to pay you, and then I change my mind and say, instead of paying you every month, I'll pay you every alternate month. And by the way, I'll only pay you 10 times in the course of 2 years. That's not going to work. And so getting the right policy clarity is kind of important. Right now, we've committed to connect 300 million people in Africa to energy by 2030. The first thing we're doing, 27th and 28th of January in Tanzania, 15 heads of state are coming with a specific energy compact plan, where they will lay out what regulatory policy changes they are willing to make by which state, for which we will put them on a P for R. We will pay them if they do and execute the regulatory policy change. Then an investor like him can say, okay, I can put my money where this is going, because those guys are putting their money where their mouths are. And that is part of the whole topic there. The second one is guarantees. Even if I get this, I need political risk guarantees. So we had guarantees across different parts of the bank. We put the whole platform together under MIGA. And now we're simplifying all the products and pricing so that it's a little easier for our field force to sell the full range of guarantees. Political risk guarantee combined with the commercial credit wrapper, the whole thing. And it's early days. The platform is just getting put together. It'll take another 6 to 8 months to clean up the due diligences and the like. We have different due diligence standards across each of our own sub-institutions. That's all work in progress. But already, our guarantee platform is double what it was a year ago. The first 3 months of this year, it's 3 times last year. So focus and simplification does lead to outcomes. That's the second one. The third one is the private sector lab said IFC, in this case, should take first loss or junior equity, which sounds great unless I actually book a loss. If I do book a loss, then to keep my AAA rating, I have to go right back to my shareholders and acquire more capital, and that's not a particularly pleasant experience, right? So,
Particularly since you have IDA.
right now, in any case, it's not a pleasant experience. But even otherwise, the
We'll
last
get to
thing,
that later.
as you and I recollect very clearly, going back to shareholders to get capital is always an unpleasant experience. So I've got to find a way to create a shock absorber of some type to enable us to do the right thing with junior equity, because that could make a difference in a calculation on a project, which we're determined to do. So once again, we're trying to create what's called a Frontier Opportunities Fund with IFC's own retained earnings, plus some donor money, and see if I can use that to help create the junior equity positions that might get projects over the edge in certain cases. A fourth category is foreign exchange, and you were at Citibank many more years before I, but at the end of the day, if anybody here knows how to figure out foreign exchange, good luck to you, because I still am learning how to do foreign exchange after 30 years in banking. And I just want to say that it's the hardest, the single hardest thing to figure out. And we're trying to do 2 or 3 things. The right long-term answer is local capital markets in these larger middle-income countries. That does work. India is one of those. The World Bank invested in HDFC years ago, and HDFC has become a big part of that capital market, blah, blah. But the issue is, it takes years. So if you want to get something done quicker, there are 2 options we're exploring. One is obviously to use local currency surplus liquidity in local commercial banks, which, as you know, the middle-income countries do have fairly large branch banking networks with money that they park overnight with their central bank at small spreads. If we could offer them a better spread and say I'd use that to finance projects, then that's a good productive use of that money. Not easy, you've got to get everybody aligned, but there's something there. And the second one is a multi-layered risk facility, where if you know that the Indonesian rupiah will decline by 10% against the dollar every year on the average, and you're him and you're investing, then you better factor the 10% in. Otherwise, what the hell are you doing? And then the issue is not the 10. The issue is if it goes to 15 for 5 years. And it's the 5-tail risk that he couldn't have factored in. So in that, if the government of Indonesia will take 3 and I take 2, and I take the 2 and give it back to Indonesia as a 50-year loan, effectively concessional free, can we find a way to bridge the gap for him? And I think certain governments are quite interested in this idea. I've got the board to approve a 50-year loan for global public goods, by the way. So we've got this kind of set up in a form to work on. And then the last one, which to me is the most interesting, is the idea of trying to really get to an asset class with this kind of investing. So if I went today to an asset manager or to Larry Fink or to a pension fund and said, wouldn't you like exposure to water in Africa? They would say yes. It ticks all their boxes, provided it makes the right returns. But if I then say, here are 22 projects of 21 million, 82 million, 104 million, 72 million, and so on, underwrite these 22, each have different covenants, different structures, different repayment terms, different rules, he's going to say, why don't you go away and come back when you grow up? And he's right. I would have said the same thing. So what you need is bundling and packaging and scale and standardization. We understand this. What I just got, Doug Peterson of S&P has agreed to lead this for me. He, along with BlackRock, some pension funds, and commercial banks, are going to work with us on how do we take this and try and, even if it takes us 3 to 4 years, find a way to create these asset classes with a rating agency wrapper so we can actually create a market in tradable securities of a certain scale from projects in this space. It will need a lot of hard work. You'll have to incentivize countries to standardize loans. You'll have to get us to understand standardized loans. You have to get the other MDVs to work with us on it. This is work, but it's begun. So that's kind of the work going on in the private sector lab.
Going back to the point you just made, what is the relationship today with the regional development banks? Because of some of them, like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, seem to be very, very active in projects worldwide.
Yeah.
With the One Belt, One Road. I mean, are you working with them? Is it affecting you?
I do
What is the
co-financing.
relationship?
I do co-financing with AIIB. They're one of my biggest co-financing partners. But I work with all the other MDBs. So what I did was, when I came, I heard a lot of complaints about the fact that we don't work together.
Exactly why I asked the question.
So I broke it into 2 parts. One being, what can we do bilaterally?
Right.
And so I've struck with every one of these bigger banks, the Inter-American Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the EBRD, the Islamic Development Bank, and AIIB, and said, let's focus on 3 things together, 3 separate things. In the case of Inter-American, it's Amazon, obviously. It's climate issues in the Caribbean, and it's girls' education through digital, because during COVID, Latin America got pretty badly slammed on the education for gender. It became a big issue. So the three things we're focusing on for that is these 3. It's not that we're not working on 5 other things with them, but these 3, he and I track every period of time together. How are our teams making progress on them? And so on with each of these banks. That is at a bilateral level. At a multilateral level, the biggest pain point was co-financing. So we would go find a deal, get it, and then go and hawk it to 4 other banks. And we even charged a fee at one point of time, which I've killed, because we're not in the profit-making business. And so instead, what we're doing now is created a digital platform, which we've launched, and all banks can put in their projects into it at one time, and we bid together. So the country receiving it doesn't have to do 3 due diligences, 3 project preparations. It becomes much easier. 100 and odd projects are now in the pipeline already. It was launched at the spring meetings. And the first few projects are beginning to go into financing. So that's another example of trying to do things together. A third one, which I'm getting a lot of requests on, is can we do things on a country platform basis? And I find that fascinating, because most of these banks are the same shareholders, but clearly the shareholders can't agree, but they want their banks to agree, which I just find to be a fascinating conversation. And I'm not shy about calling it out, as you can see. And so it's not easy. It's much more complicated than it should be. But I will tell you, with the Asian Development Bank, I've reached a stage where we will be able to sign off soon, I hope, with both boards approving it, that we will rely totally on each other's work. So if they do the due diligence and KYC, I will accept it. If I do it, they will accept it. It will change the way these banks work on the ground. When you're in the Pacific Islands, every one of these darn projects is co-financed between the 2 of us. Those islands don't have the capacity to deal with one of us, let alone 2 of us. So procurement practices, due to you get the whole thing. That's what
Well,
we're
I think
doing.
that would make a major change, would be big-time progress.
We're pretty close to the Asian Development Bank one. It's the one that has made the most progress. We've got to get there and get the boards to sign off, so it's not done yet. And then we'll see what else we can do.
Okay, I wanted to come lastly to your favorite project of the moment and find out how we can help in Bretton Woods, but also people here in the audience, which is the IDA replenishment, because it's so vital to the work that the World Bank Group does.
You can write a check. I can leverage it. Every dollar you give me, I leverage 4 times in IDA. It's 8 to 10 times in IBRD. All the jokes aside. So the December 1st week is the pledging event in Seoul. We're in the last legs of this race to get IDA 21 replenished. The challenge has been that the last IDAs, last few of them, the donor countries have flatlined at about 24 odd billion. It's not really fair to say flatlined because one of those IDAs was only 2 years. Most of them are 3 years, but in between, because of COVID, one became 2 years. So it's not really a fair statement, but the reality is for IDA as a whole, it's 24 billion on the average. With leverage, 24 gets you about 1993. It depends on how much you give away in grants and how much you give as concessional, because the denominator effect counts. My hope this time is to cross 100 plus and get to the right place with this, which will require additional financing from donors. I would say there are 3 challenges in the topic. The first one is most wealthy countries currently have, as you probably have noticed, a few challenges in their politics and their fiscal circumstances. And so if you were to take France, which is currently going through a difficult time vis-a-vis its budgetary deficit and the EU rules, that's a problem. Germany is going through an interesting discussion in their coalition about the debt brake. So everybody's got something going on. And when you combine all that together, you've also got the issue of currency depreciations, which means that to contribute what they contributed last time in dollars, if you were the Japanese, you've got to add 25 to 30% more in yen, which is where their budget comes from. So you've got fiscal challenges, political challenges, and currency depreciations that could get in the way of getting this the right way. Having said that, Denmark just came out with a 40% increase. Spain is in the process of announcing a sizable increase, and the UK is in the process of announcing a sizable increase. So that's a good start. France is challenged, others are challenged, but there are others who are going in the right direction. So I'm still relatively optimistic that we'll get to that number. The reality of IDA has got 3 things that work for it. And the first is affordable financing. About 30% of IDA is pure grant. No repayment of any type. No interest, no principal. For the poorest and weakest countries. So for example, 4 countries going through the G20 Common Framework, Chad, Ethiopia, Ghana, and Zambia. For the last 3 years, we're the only ones who've given them money. We've given them 17 billion, about half concessional, half grant, and about half net positive. So without that, they would be really stressed. No lifeline. The second reason for IDA is its knowledge base, because as you kind of learn from each country as you go along, and you can take successes back and forth. So we picked up, for example, in China, the work they've done on getting coal and wood out of home cooking and replaced with solar, with a series of very interesting ways of working their way through it. That's a good learning. It's going elsewhere, and so on. And the third item is the leverage, the 3.5 to 4 times a dollar that you can get out of IDA. What IDA has delivered is, and this is facts over the last decade, 900 million people have had access to better healthcare because of IDA. 900 million. 117 million people have got connected to electricity because of IDA. 94 million people have got access to clean drinking water because of IDA, all in the last decade. 18 million small farmers have got access to better technology and seeds and the like because of IDA. These are facts. These are not, you can argue about everything else and measure this, measure that. So I don't know if the number is off by 1 million and I've changed some number in my head, but these are hundreds of millions, and that's the impact. And this work was done over the last decade, well before I got involved. And my approach is, this is real. And IDA is the lifeline for these countries. And it's critical that we find the right way to work this through over the coming period. What do you need to do? Make noise. Make as much noise as you can with whoever you believe is an influencer in putting their money to work on this topic. This is the time for countries to think, richer countries, to think about how to get leverage on their money. Everybody has ODA issues, but you're making conscious choices about how much money goes bilaterally versus how much goes multilaterally. I understand the advantage of bilateral. It's political headroom and negotiation. I got it. If I was in their shoes, I would do it too. But as I was telling the Australians, the Prime Minister the other day in Australia, and I said, listen, you got to give $10 to ODA. I got no problem. Give 6 bilaterally, give me 4. My 4 becomes 16. 16 and 6 is 22. Australia just created 22 from 10. That's magic. Which government program do you know that does that? Most government programs take 10 and make it 2. Kind of looked at me, he laughed exactly like that and said, you're cheeky. I said, well, you know. It's the truth, and the truth will set you free. So the issue is make as much noise as you can, because this is the time. Let me tell you why I'm really concerned. It goes back to where I started about the plumbing. This is not about schools and gender and clean air and clean water. It's not about the building blocks of development. It is about a very simple thing. 1.2 billion young people in the global south, emerging markets, are coming through the pipe ready to have a job in the next 15 years. 1.2 billion. That's supposed to be our demographic dividend for our future. And it could be if they're productively employed when they're ready, and before that they get clean air, clean water, healthcare, and education. Currently, the same countries are forecasted to generate under 450 million jobs. That's a very large gap. Forecasts are not destiny, but they will be destiny if we don't do something about it. If you don't do something about it, if you think today's migration into borders is the problem, just wait 10 years. It's coming. Because what will these young people do when they have no hope and no dignity in the country they're in? They've got 3 choices: social instability, military challenges and coups, migration. That's what they've got. What else will they do? And so I think we have to be, it's in our own selfish self-interest to find interesting and smart ways to engage with these countries, both for a constructive point of view, which is to take this opportunity of 1.2 billion people and make them our future. Because after all, they will consume. If you give them jobs, they will consume. They will buy produce, they will buy products, they will buy our intellectual property, they will buy all the things we care about. And also, the world will be safer and better off with their enthusiasm and their optimism. It's our chance, Bill, but we only got 15 years.
Well, you actually spoke to my last question, which is the biggest concern you have.
So we can end.
Going forward. And
that's my concern.
Huh?
This is my concern.
Well, I think it's a big concern.
This is my concern.
And
but I also think it's an opportunity. Please don't get me wrong. It's a concern if we don't do anything. It's a real opportunity. Like in the last 20, 30 years, it's not a secret that jobs created the biggest dent in poverty. China had 780 million people in poverty in 1978. You know this number. 98% of people living in rural China were extreme poor.
Right.
In the subsequent 38 years, they've generated how many jobs a year?
Tremendous.
8 million jobs a year on the average.
Right.
320 million jobs. How else did they get to where they got to? You can talk about all the things with their growth model. I'm not justifying any of that. I'm just saying jobs are the way to drive a nail in the coffin of poverty. Jobs.
I think that's a good way to end, and thank you very much for the job you're doing at the World Bank, for the support you're giving Bretton Woods, and if we can do anything to help you, please let us know.
Please make some noise.
We will, particularly on
thank you.
IDA.